So, guten Tag, meine Damen und Herren. Ich glaube, wir fangen mal an. Die anderen werden noch kommen. Es ist etwas schwer zu finden und die Vorlesung findet immer um 1:15 statt. Herzlich willkommen zu Introduction to Information Architecture. Darf ich zunächst fragen, wer kein Deutsch spricht oder versteht? Okay. Das ist ganz neu. Sorry, do you understand German or English?
Only English.
Aha, there we go. So, we usually do that then if there's one or more people who do not speak German or understand German, we do it in English, but you can try to stop me any time to get the expressions in German. So, welcome to this course, Introduction to Information Architecture. It will be an unusual course. Some of you might recognize these two countries. By the way, who has been watching the Grand Prix yesterday? Nobody? You're all so busy. But you know, the Grand Prix was in this country last night, in Singapore. And we are here in Switzerland, obviously, at this point. But many interactions we will have in the next weeks and months will be between those two countries. And you will see, hopefully, why. This is an example from this region around Singapore in Asia that we're dealing a lot with. And it's an interesting image because it shows many of the things that we're trying to cover in this course. That means the relation between the country, between the people, between architecture, and between technology. This one is north of Singapore. It's in Myanmar, and you can see a completely different construction type, but you can also see already the combination with very high-tech equipment in this particular building. So this is one extreme. And then, of course, here we have the other extreme in Switzerland, which is coming from a different direction. The landscape and the very rough and tall landscape here has a very important role to play. Another view on the other side on Singapore. If you have watched these videos or images from this country, you might have seen this building, which is a relatively new building, which shows the different direction of architecture that has been taken there. I don't think one would build a building in Zurich or in Switzerland like this. But you also will learn more about this in the next weeks. And then this compared to Switzerland, we have a completely different landscape. We have a completely different treatment of water, of interaction between nature and architecture and landscape. And it's my idea really to expose you to these differences, always under the aspect of information and architecture. The overview of this fall semester, we start, of course, with the chair, with the people who are working here that you will be working with. Then we go into some definitions, and we will introduce the exercise and have hopefully a brief discussion at the end from which parts of the course you are particularly interested in. So first, the chair. It's relatively new. It exists only for 5-6 years by now. And it's called information architecture, which is unusual because in the United States and in the English-speaking countries, under information architecture, you understand normally the treatment of websites and making structures on the web that you could understand better. So it has a different purpose than what we are talking about. But this we will say in the definitions. So the people who are here at this moment, as you can see, myself, I do have a background, or my first study was in architecture, somebody asked that before, and then expanded into the area of computation, especially artificial intelligence and city planning from the very beginning, and this is also what we will talk about this semester. Then there is visiting Professor Daniel Aliaga. He is a very, very advanced person from Purdue University in the United States, a specialist on modeling, and actually you will see his lecture next Monday already. Then it's Jan Halac. Some of you might be taking this other course. Can I see who of you is taking the course in the morning with Jan Halac? You? Okay. So there's a small overlap, that's fine. Then there is Anastasia Koltsova. She's there in the background, and she will also be talking and teaching the course in the afternoon that follows after this one. She's also a PhD candidate, so you will be able to discuss with her a lot. Antje Kunze, she's also in the chair. She's involved in the course in the morning. Christian Schneider, he has given a lot of input in the last years into the programming. Yes, please go ahead and take a seat. Then there is Dongyeon Shin. He's over there under the screen, as you can see there. He's also a PhD candidate doing very interesting work. Both of them are doing very interesting work, and you will hear more about it. Then finally, two important people you don't see here. It's Martina Semi. She is in the chair for information architecture, which is in H31, 2 floors up this direction. And also Frau Denise Weber. So if you have any question in administrative or human resource matters, these are the ones to talk to. So that's the chair here. We have another big part of the chair in Singapore. We are by now in the so-called simulation platform already 15 PhD candidates. The general information, today you see the lecture, that's where you are in now. I thank you for coming at this time, for finding it. It will not be so hard for the next lectures, and always goes until 1:30. Here you have to participate as the lecture courses go, and sign up that you have participated, and do one exercise. So that is what fulfills the requirements for the credit point that you will receive. Then, as mentioned before, articulating urban complexities. This is the very important workshop and also follow-up to the lecture, which is happening this afternoon. And this will be taught by Anastasia Koltsova. Yes, you can still, there's still some seats here in the front. So that will be taught by Anastasia Koltsova, who has a background from the AA in England, and also by Luis Giesler, who has been a previous student here at ETH and then has had extensive practice, so that will bring together programming and practice, I think, in a very nice way. And then, of course, there's the intensive course, das Vertiefungsfach, that you are participating in by Jan Halac, and this has more credit points and therefore also, of course, more work to invest. Yes?
Is the exercise mandatory as well with this course together?
It's not mandatory, but it is very good, yes. And this course, the big course, is called New Methods in Urban Simulation. It took place for the first time this morning. So if one of you is interested after this or after the course this afternoon, you can still talk to Jan Halac, who's also at the Chair for Information Architecture. He's teaching that together with Lukas Dreyer. And Lukas Dreyer is also a previous student from here, who's also responsible for this room which we are in, which is called the Value Lab. All these new things I hope you will understand them in the course of the course. The overview over the lectures is like this. We have the introduction today. Then we will have the modeling of urban systems. I want to turn around the old lectures that we did in the previous years, because I want to start this year really with examples at the beginning, and then maybe from that you get many, many questions, and we can go deeper into these questions during the course. So you will get two very interesting, almost complete presentations, modeling of urban systems, how it is done in the United States in that case, and then information architecture definition and examples from Stefan Müller, Arizona, coming directly from Singapore to you. Then we go into the information components of future architecture. This is important because sometimes people are not aware how many information components you have in existing architecture and in the architecture that you want to design. Then it's a seminar week, there's no class. Then comes theory, experiment, and simulation. That brings us deeper and deeper into the simulation processes, which are important for our work. You then will have a view back into history, but you will find out it's a very modern view into history, because most of the things that you hear about here, you will be able to find them in the Bibliotheca Werner Oechslin, who is one of the world leaders of architectural history and who's probably the best architectural history library worldwide. Then we go into so-called stocks and flows, people, water, material, energy, and space. This is important to understand the interrelationships between information and architecture and design. And we'll display the Future Cities Laboratory as a whole in the end, and also show results from the new tools in architectural and urban simulation by Jan Halacz. Finally, there will be the presentation of students' works of the other courses, and you're all welcome to participate in those because this is always extremely interesting. So that's the overview of the course. Do you have any questions right now already?
But it's possible to just participate in this course?
That is possible too, yes.
We
It's
don't
possible
okay.
too. Right. Good. Then let's go into some of the more difficult parts, which is the definitions. And I try to approach the definitions from two angles. And you can see there's capitalized names and there is normal names. So information is capitalized in this case, and architecture is small. So this is focusing on information architecture. And the second then will be on information architecture. This is crucial because this is the foundation of our chair. If you imagine, you look at architecture, you look at architecture, but there are many things in architecture that you don't see. So that is one way of looking at information architecture. There's a lot of information in architecture that you don't see, but which you can make visible. On the other hand, architecture is a very powerful metaphor, not only for architects, but for the general public. I'm sure you have heard many examples of computer architecture and other types of architecture. Here they use architecture as a metaphor. So both parts are combined in this chair. Let's look at maybe what you are coming from. And here I want to make a certain point. The result or the effect or the informedness of architecture depends to a large degree on the methods and tools that you use for planning. Here we see a combination of data, of information. It is a plan. Actually, it's not a plan here, but it's a plan in Ethiopia. And this simple plan in Ethiopia depicts the future living environment for thousands of people who will live in this new city quarter in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. All the building people have at this point is this plan. And you can see a big difference between the preciseness, let's say, of the territory that has been recorded here with these height lines, which has been done by surveyors, and the very sketchy plan of the layout of this new city quarter. One of the reasons is that the instruments that these people are planning there don't have at their disposal all kinds of new instruments that you are being introduced to in these three courses. And the other hand is that you can see a big disparity between the precision and the use of instruments. Very exact from surveying, not so exact from actually building. Which is a pity, because our goal is in the end to combine both of these worlds at the most possible high precision. The result is very interesting. This is a building site on this plan that I showed before, and you can see in a very positive way, this is probably one of the most sustainable constructions you could do today. It looks very simple, but you can see it's all done with renewable materials, and the buildings that come into existence at the end, if they are planned well, are quite beautiful. This is another example how they put up the buildings, but all the elements that you learn in architectural education, the foundations, the columns, the scaffolding, the reinforced columns, everything is there, but it's done in a very simple way, because many of the what we call the digital chain of the instruments in between the planning and design and the execution are missing. Ethiopia will play a big role also in the lecture, because it is one of the centers where we focus on from our project. Then you have a completely different extreme, and this, by now, you maybe recognize it, what it is. Singapore. Is anyone here from Singapore? You are?
I worked in Singapore.
Pardon? You have?
I did work in Singapore.
You worked in Singapore. Okay, so you recognize the island. And mind you, this island is not looking as it looked 50 years ago. In the last 45 years, or 35 years actually, this island, which used to be only less than 500 square kilometers, has been expanded by more than 200 square kilometers. So all of these regions here are new. They are created newly from the sea. But what we're looking at here is an example of the precision of the instruments. We look at the, it says 3-degree drainage networks. So this is a very relatively coarse look at the topography of Singapore, at the little hills and mountains and valleys that are there. It looks flat if you fly with a plane over it, but in reality it's quite modulated, and this is important because of the strong rain coming down, flooding whole areas. So with the old techniques, you were able to depict, okay, there is something like a floodplain maybe in this area, there is some water collected here flowing into the sea here or here, but not much more. This is much too coarse if you really have to plan on site. But it could give already some indication of the areas which are in danger of being flooded. Some. But if you think that this island has about the size of the Lake Geneva now, and that 5 million people are living on this island, you can see immediately this scale is too coarse. What do? You develop new instruments, new computational instruments that combine terrestrial observation plus maps that you already have, and you can come to a much finer look at the individual floodplains. And you can go down even more, but you can see here immediately it's a different picture, and you know much more precisely where you will be in danger of being flooded. So that maybe shows you two things, I hope. That the matter of scale is very important in information architecture, and the matter of precision is very important, because that in the end determines if you will be in a good or in a bad environment. If you go into the scale and into the processes that inform architecture, of course the building process is very important. Here you see the building that I showed at the beginning, this one that had this ship on top of it, which by the way has the dimension of the Titanic, under construction. So this was the columns, these are the hotels, and on top of this they started to construct the building. And you can see the very, very strong use of technical materials. So if you go back a few slides, look at this versus this, and you can see a huge difference. And the end result also is different, of course, very different. But in the end, probably, or not probably, definitely, this one is less sustainable than what was created with the other means. And also with the very first image that I showed, this building sitting in the water. So that brings to us a very interesting question that will accompany you through the whole course, I hope, and that is the question of urban sustainability. Do new instruments and methods automatically help to make environments, cities in particular, more sustainable or not? If you use this instrument in the proper way, the answer is a clear yes. But if you don't, you create even more unsustainable environments than before. So this is really something I would like to discuss with you also during the course when you see examples where this is possible or not. So we're still in the definition phase. This was always the image that I found or took a picture of years ago, which struck me very much because there for the first time I really saw something where I thought this is really information architecture. Do you know this image? I've been to India, New Delhi today. So it's written at the bottom, of course, this is the Janta Manta, and this is astronomical observatories of Jai Singh II, built between 1727 and 1734. So this is a very early, I think, of information architecture, because it was architecture made especially, in this case, to observe and to gain information. It was a celestial observatory, and you can see each one of the individual buildings designed and built for a specific purpose of observation. But if you see it today and you don't know what it was made for, you think this is very interesting, but you need to know what the background was, the information that they were looking for in order to understand this building. And here you can, of course, pose the question, is it information architecture or is it information architecture? This one is a very contemporary example of information architecture. By the way, also what you learn in the course of Jan Halach in the morning, because it shows our newest instruments that we're using today, and shows the relation between land use, which is this one here, and three-dimensional masses superimposed, this one superimposed on this, and then going even deeper into the details of that one. So here you can see again the three different scales. Land use is very, very large scale. That's what we call the urban design and sometimes even the territorial planning scale. Then here you go really into the city quarter and the building scale. And then here you can go into the building, into the last detail, to the frame of the door if you want to. And these are tools that allow you to do that, to scale up your decisions from large scale to very small scale or the other way around. This is a tool that didn't exist 30, 40 years ago, but which is very powerful now. Again, you need to know how to use it. Okay, now here an attempt to explain these two information architecture and information architecture. In information architecture, where information is really at the front, there we use metaphors and principles of physical architecture, apply them to digital data and information to create an architecture of information using information as raw material. You hopefully have heard the difference between, or you can imagine the difference between data, such as the time, or information, which is the combination of data, and then knowledge, which is really what you need in architecture to design. So this would be a definition of information architecture. And then information architecture would be to make the invisible visible. For example, in this space, what can you not see, but which is defined by architecture of this space?
Acoustics.
Pardon? Acoustic, yes. You can hear it, but you cannot see it. Exactly. What else?
Heat. Heat.
Heat, right. Temperature. So these are two very good examples. And if you make them visible, suddenly this space becomes a different meaning, gets a different meaning. Because this space, as a matter of fact, the whole building, as a matter of fact, was designed also according to these invisible factors. And we turned these factors around, knowing about how they could be calculated in order to make the building a good piece of architecture, which you will see in every single room around here. They all look different. This is the only one which is double space, with the brother of this room in the other side. But the other spaces are all calculated to fulfill exact architectural, heating, and acoustical conditions. And you can do that only by making the invisible visible for the designers. So these are the two things. Maybe a few more examples, also to connect to your previous understanding of architecture. Architecture is generally defined as a thoughtful analysis to manifest thoughtful synthesis, that being called design, whereas the architecture of information is the design of the structure or the organization of information. And in that sense, the information architecture expands the definition of architecture to areas outside the traditional realm. When we show you then the Singapore project and all the people who are involved in this project, you will see that the one thing that connects all of them is the treatment of data and information to generate a general framework of information and how it can be used in order to expand this traditional way of thinking and making architecture. Whereas then, on the other hand, information architecture uses the metaphors for better structuring, understanding, and communicating information. There are beautiful books on that. One is a standard book. Maybe one of you knows it. Actually, a book that was called Information Architecture. That's about 20, 25 years old. Do you know that book? No? Okay, so we'll bring it and show it one of the next lectures. But there you can see the origins of this whole topic. A few examples for information architecture. Might look strange, but can you imagine what that is?
It's a plan of movement of people here around.
That could be, but it's in this case not the flow of people, it's the flow of money that goes into the individual departments here at ETH, and you can see where the money comes from and where it goes to. This is an interactive 3D installation, and this one here is like a wall with which you can deflect and steer the flow of money to other departments. So that we did as an irony on the flow of money in the university. So you can use abstract means using architectural elements such as a wall or a deflector to show something else. So in this case, it was even a cascade where the money came from Bern, from the government, comes to the ETH-Bereich, to the ETH domain, flows down to ETH. From ETH, it flows down into the departments. From the departments, flows down to the individual people. And eventually, it results in diplomas, in masters, in bachelors, in PhDs, and so on. So this is an abstract way using architectural metaphors. Also here, that looks like a city, but it is one of our first courses in information architecture, so-called Phase X experiment, already 12, 13 years ago. And this is not a city, but it is the students' work. So this is exercise 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and you can see they get less and less and less towards the end of the semester, which you would expect. But it also combines this very interesting relation between the projects, because there we didn't want to do everyone his or her own project the whole semester, but everybody had to take the previous exercise from somebody else and keep working on that exercise. So you see all these relations between the different works, and you can also see how much time, for example, is spent on it. That then is a different representation of the same information architecture of this course. It's not the city, it's not a piece of art, it's really the course, the information that the students generated with this course in terms of connections and also when they actually started their design piece and when they ended and what impact it had on the overall course. So you can see quite a different information structure, which is quite typical. You can also see that, for example, in this time there was nothing. That was Christmas holidays. You can see seminar weeks here happening, but you also can see that some were very powerful in generating pieces that were important for the whole course because many people picked up on these individual pieces. And then even more interesting, a few semesters later, we started everything from one point, saying this is the Ausgangslage, here is your assignment. And then people started to work in different steps. Now the steps don't follow like this, but they come out from the center, move into these different parts. The connections are shown by interconnected lines here, and the results are integrated into the same representation. So it's also kind of information architecture. It's interesting that other disciplines, such as physics, use this type of visualization today very strongly. This is, of course, a picture from the CMS experiment in the CERN in Geneva. And it's not just a simulation, and it's not just a picture, but it's enhanced, just like the previous one that I showed, enhanced to make it more understandable. Also using architectural metaphors. Okay, now let's look at the other side, the information architecture. That uses simulation for more than creating images or artifacts based on geometric constraints, rules, or cases. Rather, this non-geometric factors such as light, energy, structure, behavior, or system knowledge become available for integrated direct modeling to formalize and generalize design principles. I guess many of you, at least myself, would want to have these kind of tools that you would get immediate feedback in the other areas from what you do when you design something. Normally we don't get that. We have, do the design, then give it to somebody else, then maybe do an energy analysis. By the time it's done, you have already changed the design. This is very tedious and not very effective. There are courses here at ETH. All of those who take the courses of Hans-Jürg Leipold-Gut and Arno Schlüter should know that they try to couple design and energy calculation. But design and light, design and acoustics, all these things are still not very well connected. But that's the goal. And of course, it has a long history in architectural thinking. All the ideal cities, they were not just meant as architectural or geometrical exercises, but in these drawings at this time, there was a lot of information embedded to make many invisible things visible. So if you go into these images deeper and deeper and deeper, you start to discover many, many things that are important, not only for geometry, but for a way of organizing a society, for example, or organizing the ideal city. So that brings us very close to today and to here. For example, this one here. Do you know that you sit on a dynamic Earth storage system? If you have read the last ETH print, then you probably have seen this. But this was a pure architecture, information architecture concept that we developed 6 years ago from now, by saying, let's not look just at the surface and let's not look just at the individual building, but look at the potential interaction of these buildings. Meaning that excess heat, for example, from one building, you can need in another building. This building here, for example, uses heat, excess heat from the chemistry building. In earlier days, we would have just cooled down the chemistry building, thrown away the energy, and heated this one separately. Now we can feed the heat coming from this chemistry building into this pipeline connecting all buildings and use the heat here to heat this building. This is one thing. And the other thing is that if you have still too much heat in the summer, which will happen all the time, that you dump this heat in the earth with this dynamic earth storage and take it out in winter with heat pumps to make the overall energy balance of the building and of the campus better. So that's a very nice example also for information architecture. You look at it, you don't see anything about it. Even if you look very hard, you won't see that whole system which is underneath and which is purely connected by the knowledge that how you can use the heat and the cooling effects of a campus in this climate here. Unfortunately, something like this would not work at all in Singapore and many other places where we are designing new cities. But for all the northern countries and the temperate climates, this works extremely well. Oh, this one, a very, very early example when we just were at the beginning in the last century trying to combine architecture and information, showing the invisible. For example, that was the simulation of the dome of the ETH downtown, where then Sumi and partner designed a beautiful visualization lab, which was the predecessor of this one here. And that was the simulation of the light conditions on each table so that people could work there. And the ones who are in the simulation exercise downstairs would not be blinded, for example. Okay, now let's move to the last one. The information architecture, we really combined the two. This one here was the first step of visualization. This one here was 2 generations later. This was the so-called Blue Sea project, combining visualization of things that happen in another place, downtown and up here. And that is what still exists in a simplified version in the architecture building over there. That's the so-called red hell. That red hell could do many more things than just presentations. It actually could take people, like you can see here, which were recorded in 3D downtown, transport them up here, and these cameras sitting outside plus the projection could regenerate that person in 3D in that place. So that is the past. This is also the past, but this is still very relevant. This is the information architecture of the Monte Rosa Hütte. We will also go into this one, because if you just look at this building, it looks like it has a skin in the mountains, but if you go inside, you can see the incredible apparatus of connected systems in that one building that make it run over time. So we'll look at this also. Good. Now, we're coming to the end, or to the exercise. This is important for you. We are interested in your interpretation of sustainable information architecture or sustainable information architecture. So you can go back and visit the lecture and look at the definitions and find examples where you think the one or the other or the combination would be important. The sustainable is in green because this is very important for this exercise. You find many examples of information architecture one way or the other, but try to find examples where you can see the attempt or the actual proven sustainability in them. Until October 12th, so you have some time, to Anastasia Koltsova. Okay? Just to give you a glimpse what your people did in the past. I will repeat these definitions in the next lectures. Just a few examples. They are beautiful, but I don't want to show them now. These are exercises from your colleagues from last year. So you see an image, that's important, plus a description, what it would mean. So this is important. Here another example, quite obvious. You have data, very simple data. Then you show the representation of this data in a different way. This is the stock exchange movement, so this is one part. This is maybe not so sustainable, so that's what you should think about. Then you see typical examples, information architecture combined description of a complex organism. That could be very sustainable if it works over time. Here you see an example from the Swiss pavilion in the World Expo in Hanover in 2000, which also could be a piece of information architecture. Today, actually, you could build this whole pavilion very simply with Kamatsu Kohler's robots, so that would be a nice exercise. This one here, very nice juxtaposition where a device has been built especially for storing information, whereas here architecture has been used to display information. So this is also possible. And then examples here from Second Life, which nobody remembers quite well anymore probably, but there you have this forced interaction between information and space. Or here on the city design scale, the people who work with the space syntax, where you make an information image of the city and start to manipulate it. This one is Frau Kolzova's favorite, she tells me. This is also interesting. It's a toilet where when you go inside, it becomes opaque, hopefully, and when you go outside, it's clear again, just by the information that you're inside or outside. That is a very interesting one. Or then structures that were built to house information, like old libraries, for example. Also the library of Werner Oechslin that we will visit this year will be a very good example for that. Or then structures which already have what we deal with in the shape grammar that you will find in the newest computer programs, having been applied already hundreds and hundreds of years ago in these structures, which are also quite sustainable. Interplay between information, material, and sustainability. So these are some of the examples for the exercise. Just to point out the next two lectures, as I mentioned before, the next one will be by Daniel Aliaga. He will focus on these examples of urban simulation from the US, so you get the overview. And then it will be Stefan Müller-Arizona, who will focus on the simulation platform in urban design, which should give you also good ideas how it's used in practice. This one here is an image of this very room, but how this room is used and will be used even more in the future for interplay between information and architecture. Explanations will follow. Okay, questions? Did you understand everything so far? Yes? Yes?
Information that I missed, what is the last presentation for everybody? Is it the presentation for all courses here at the same time?
Yes, that will be the presentation of all coursework here at the end of the semester, where you can see how the different groups, the three different groups, worked all with this information architecture metaphor, but came to very different results. From programming, from modeling, or from putting together visual images like this group here. That will be in December, yes.
I have a question
Yes.
regarding this information architecture. Do you always need input information in order to create architecture, or can this information be created in the process?
Yes. That's the beauty of it. All you really need is data at the beginning, something, you know. But you transform data into information. And you can either do this bottom-up, data into information, or you can look at existing examples, and we will go through these different techniques and extract information in order to make new architecture. So this is typically what you do with when you see a very, very good building, you look, why is this so good? And you start to analyze the information that is contained, because then it helps you to design the next building. You don't want to copy and paste, but you want to understand. And this is exactly what the idea of information architecture is about. Yes?
Is this presentation online? Not the first one, the ones just presented with the definitions about what is information architecture or information
Yes.
architecture?
Yes.
Is it online?
If everything works, the whole lecture will be recorded and will be available. Dongyeon, maybe you should say when and how?
This week, every
Yes.
every week, 3-4 days later, then we'll be up to date.
Okay.
We'll
In
send you
your-
the information where you will be able to watch it.
It will be on the website of IA, the Information Architecture Chair. Okay. And if you have questions to that, please do ask Anastasia Koltsova and Dongyeon Shin, who will be here every lecture. I myself, I will not see you in person physically. That's why I'm looking at you so much now for a while, because I will be speaking to you through these screens. I will be most of the time in Singapore, next week in Tokyo, and in Seoul. But it's important for me to see you once in person, so that we have. It's easier than to connect. So when we talk to each other, it will be through the screen. I will be there in the middle, and what I show will be right and left of that. But I hope we can keep up this very good way of interaction. It's an exercise in telepresence that we've been doing for many years, and it's getting better and better through the technology. Last semester it worked quite well, and I hope, of course, that it works this semester as well.
One question still. Most lectures are focused on urban design, I see, and I'm really interested in the techniques, but I'm more interested in going into detail. Is that do you actually treat that as well in these lectures, or is it all focused on urban and bigger scales?
That's a very good question. Of course, we think that you can scale up most of these, or scale down most of these approaches, from architecture to urban design to territorial planning and vice versa. But I would be very interested that you and all the others, and I said that in the beginning to some of you, remind me or us every time to connect that more to your area of studies. Because that is always our danger, that we talk too abstract. So tell us, bring us down, because we do have examples for the move from your individual design to using information architecture in it.
Okay.
Don't be shy, just keep reminding us of this. But it's the purpose.
Yeah.
And you will see that some of these tools, like Jan Halach is teaching in the morning, with that one you can literally go from the detail of the door or the window frame to the building, to the whole city block. You know, so it's not distinct anymore. It's a continuous scale, moving up and down. But the point behind this is that you really understand this process of procedural modeling, which enables you for the first time to jump across these steps. So if you find that out during the course, then it's great.
Okay.
All right. So these are the summaries, and otherwise I wish you a wonderful semester. Hope to see you again through here, and lots of success in the semester. Okay? Thank you very much.